Okay, we're ready.
Okay, we're calling the meeting to order. This is the executive committee meeting, and we're going to start with public comment, except before that, we're going to recognize our guest, Marty. Thank you for being here. Matt, sorry, Marty's son, Max. Oh, I got that wrong. Hi, Max. Welcome. Glad to have you. Is there any public comment?
We need a roll call first.
What's that?
Roll call.
Oh, yeah, let's do the roll call.
San Mateo County. Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont. Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame. Yes. East Palo Alto. Millbrae,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yeah.
Portola Valley. And we have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay. So can we get an action to set the agenda? And I don't know that we have any consent items.
So.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor? Aye. Next item is the chair report. I don't have a report.
Okay.
Next item is the CEO report.
All right. Would you mind advancing to the CEO first slide? Just to let you all know, I'm going to focus here a bit on where we are with our COO and CFO searches. As you know, both positions have been posted. Originally, we had posted the CFO position just on our website, and we were using our own internal networks and LinkedIn and all of the rest. We weren't getting a great response. So both positions are now with the recruiter, John Fernabort Group, who's been super helpful, and I'm glad to report improvement with the CFO. So for the COO, we have 8 resumes, 8 or 9 now, that I went through on Friday. I'll be forwarding it to you. We'll talk later.
Yeah.
And some very good candidates, I'm glad to report. And then for the CFO, I'll have a fuller report this week from John, but right now I believe we have 4 or 5 applicants in, a couple of which are very strong. So that process is moving forward. I will be discussing with the chair sort of the process, but we may be tapping a couple of you to participate in finalist interviews as we go along. The goal being to have both seats filled. September would be great if we could, but September, October timeframe. Okay? So that's where we're on that. Next slide. Did want to just report out and invite anyone here who's in the meetings to say what you like, but the surplus funds ad hoc committee met on August 9th. Thank you, Anders, for joining us for that. We made good progress. We heard the rest of our staff presentations regarding customer composition and rates from Leslie, energy programs from Raphael, and customer survey feedback from Gwen. And then moved into a broader discussion around categories of allocation, just as a kind of way to organize our thoughts. And there are 4 that were discussed. One is increase reserves or days cash on hand. We talked about increasing customer savings through rate discounts or rebate. We talked about additional funding for customer programs across all of our program categories. And then we talked about funding for PCE sponsored local power projects. And then in the discussion also surfaced discussion about school support. So our next steps on all of that, and I would say that all committee members participated and provided initial feedback on kind of initial thinking. Our next step is to gather up all of that, and then we will provide a report out to committee members, an opportunity for additional thought, and then we will be meeting again for the 3rd time right after Labor Day. And I would say that we are on track to be done, I would say, in the next couple of months. Our goal is to have it back to the board in time for the retreat, which we'll be discussing later, is looking like November. Next slide. Okay, we want to thank everybody who participated in the board survey that was sent out at the beginning of July. There were 15 respondents, which constitutes a majority. And these are not in here now. Okay, so I cannot read these. Hold on. They're no longer in the consolidated deck. Nellie?
Nope, took them out.
Okay, all right, I can read well enough. So there's only, I'm gonna move through these quickly, because there's really only, there are just a couple of material changes. Otherwise, the top line news is that the board validated the majority of how we're operating and how it's working for you. So 60% of the group on our first question, how often would you like to meet with the CEO and or the chair? 60% of you said no particular schedule as needed. Another 26% said once or twice a year. So what we will plan to do is continue our annual visits to your council for the update. And then for those who I don't have a previous relationship with, I'd like to meet with folks, have lunch, and just do that at least annually. So there was that. Next slide. Okay, so earlier in the year, I think this was Donna's idea of having a board mentor, board buddy system. So it's a, you know, not a majority, but 6 folks said, yeah, it would be helpful to have somebody to check in with periodically. And then a couple of other people said they didn't need it. I think the good news is that 3 people raised their hands to be a board mentor. So we will connect these folks and get that going so that the purpose here is to just have a check-in with a more senior board member. If there are questions about how things work and all of that, certainly observant of Brown Act requirements. Next slide. Next question was about PCE's newsletter. So this is the newsletter that we send out every Friday afternoon, usually right about 5 o'clock. It includes this week's media, it includes different news bites of things going on in the agency and in the industry. And darn near half said, keep it weekly, keep it as is. So I'm glad to hear the feedback that generally the board likes those and we will keep it as is. Next slide. Okay, so this one was about board meeting agendas and staff presentations. Are they too long? Are they too short? Are they just about right, etc. So the good news here is that the majority of the respondents said it's about right and about the right level of detail. There are some, and I've received direct feedback that our board presentations at the staff level, the slides, are sometimes too dense and too long. And so we will operate under the assumption that the board members have read the packet so that we don't need to regurgitate everything in a slide deck. And we're working toward making those tighter presentations. Next
What was
slide.
the difference between item 1 and 2? They're both, it's about right,
About right, not too long
you know, or too short as the first one, but the second one,
in terms of staff presentation and board discussion.
okay, so they're pretty close to the same
Yeah.
thing.
About right, what was the third one in terms of, but need more
Or discussion.
board discussion, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess here I also want to say, like, if anyone has feedback, please let me know and we'll do our best to accommodate your comments. Okay, next was, I'm interested in educational segments at the board meetings. So I think we've discussed this, that we would like to, as time permits, sprinkle in educational topics. We had a pretty in-depth discussion on regionalization last month. And we will then, we will take all of your good suggestions to heart and then sprinkle these in, probably maybe quarterly, but mainly looking at the agenda and make sure that we're not going to keep you here for 3 hours. Okay, next up. Should we serve food? And so this was interesting. 60% said, yes, I don't have time after work to have dinner. So I think what we want to do, and then the other said just snacks are fine. So what we will do is Nellie will follow up with you before the board meeting to ask if you would like dinner. And we will order accordingly, right? Is that fair, Nellie?
So we have, do you guys all do stuff for your like closed sessions and things?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we just order like some sweet greens or something,
Exactly.
what people can get their own dietary, whatever. So I guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think, or Nellie, I don't want to interrupt you. What's your thought process on this?
We can do it, both ways. I can do, send out an order to a link somewhere where everybody can put in their personal things, or I can do something that's kind of, maybe do a little survey, kind of see what dietary restrictions are, and then put in an order for a couple items that kind of will generally meet everybody. So I could do it either way and probably do a mix of that and see what works best and
Yeah.
what makes sense.
The thing we don't want to do is over order and have tons of
Correct.
questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I was
Okay,
saying.
so when Nellie asks, please respond.
We use Bianchini's, which is a market right around the corner. And they do fine, sometimes specialty has sandwiches, I mean, they always have sandwiches,
Oh, right,
and
yeah.
we order those sometimes. So we're pretty close to you. If you wanna coordinate with us, I can put in, Anthony Suber is the guy that manages that, so.
I feel like I know that name, so yeah.
Yeah.
I will, I'll be in touch.
Cool, thank you. All right, so that was the response there. Next up. Okay, I think the written staff reports in the board packets are. Vast majority said the right amount of information for the agenda presented. So, as I said before, what we're gonna do is not have the slides be an exact duplicate, trying to tighten up those presentations, knowing that the staff reports are hitting it at the right level of detail for you. Okay? Next up. I'd like to receive yeah, there you go, thanks. Or read the PCE department updates. This is one place where it is going to change, because you guys might recall that every month, in the back half of your packet, there would be multiple pages of department reports with sort of minor updates in in numbers. Not very meaningful, because a month sometimes a lot happens or nothing, very little. So what staff recommended and the group agreed with is that we will shift those to quarterly. We will do that on a rotating basis, so you'll get a couple of departments one month, a couple more the second month, so that it's not a mass quantity of reading every quarter, okay? And that's more manageable for the staff and for you. Okay, moving, next one, please. Prefer the board retreat to be. Okay, so we just did a number of kind of alternatives here. And the vast majority says, we would like to just go ahead and keep it the way we've done the last few years, add 3 to 4 hours, or do 3 to 4 hours in lieu of a board meeting. And so what you will see on the August board agenda is just approval to change the board retreat to November. I believe, is that November 16th? Something like that, 15th, right before Thanksgiving. Okay, and it will be here in the office. Next up. Content and approach. So 50% say they like a mix of reports and interactive facilitated discussion. So one thing I would like to say here is that as a staff, we talked about having the strategic plan update, which takes some time. And it's really the metrics report out to you. What we'd like to do is bring that to the board in September or October in advance of the retreat. So we have time at the retreat to then start thinking about strategy and future things.
That's smart.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's smart.
Okay, beautiful. So that, just anticipate that will happen. We'll split it up. Okay, then I think the last one here, other suggestions, okay, reducing, okay. So I think all the rest of this, and I will say that the office hours that we put together for Fridays are working well. Staff is showing up and it's a wide range of discussions. So invite the board members to do the same if you like. Okay, and I think that concludes my report. As it
Great.
does. Thank you.
Okay, excellent, good report. Next item on the agenda is overview and update of programs department.
Rafael Reyes will provide this information, which then will feed into the next agenda item. So they kind of go together.
Directors, thank you for your time. We felt that this would be a good opportunity to quickly recap where we are with programs and also set some context with regards to forthcoming developments and the new program that Blake Hirschhand will be speaking to here in a moment. I'll move fairly quickly through the first half of the presentation. It's information that most or all directors here are relatively familiar with. Next slide. Next slide. So as directors are aware, we're operating under the strategic plan that the board has established and been refining since 2020. Our topmost priority from a departmental perspective is towards our decarbonization objective to help move the region towards 100% greenhouse gas free by 2035, which was an updated goal by the board in late 2021. I won't go through all the verbiage here, but we're of course trying to drive the decarbonization programs, really moving towards market momentum in transportation and start the process of the transition in buildings, support our 24/7 renewable goals by aligning demand with renewable supply, then of course deliver community benefits and leverage innovation and leadership to drive scale. Next slide. As most of you are aware, we went through an extensive analytic process last year on looking at how to, what we can achieve and how to drive maximum scale in our decarbonization goals. As part of that, the board approved clear emphasis on particular areas where programs will focus its attention. So those areas here in the dark text are the areas where we're focusing our programs. So in transportation, primarily in passenger vehicles, but also in local commercial fleets, including local government fleets, alternative mobility. In buildings, the emphasis here is on residential and specifically single family and small multifamily, which have all of the heating and associated systems inside the building as opposed to central systems. Then also we are looking to ultimately cover some office and small commercial. Again, Blake will be speaking to that in the context of local government, a local government initiative we'd like to propose. And then to a limited degree, perhaps touch on some of these other areas, but much more selectively, so large commercial and multifamily. And it covers approximately 65% of the emissions pie, which we are seeing here on the diagram on the upper right. Next slide. As you are aware, we have three major pillars to our general strategy. The first is to influence individual decisions through our incentives and technical assistance, education, and so forth. We help shape policy, and that's both supporting local policy like REACH codes, but also then informing and help shaping state policy to drive scale, and then fostering innovation through our various supports for new technologies and methods. Next slide. Our programs portfolio, I'm not going to go through this in detail. I think everybody here has seen this diagram, but we have three major sectors: buildings, transportation, distributed resources. Moving from the upper left, the REACH codes, we have incentives across our for appliance clean and efficient electric appliances. That also includes our low-income specific programs in transportation, and particularly heavy emphasis in electric vehicle charging, but also in used EVs, municipal fleets, and e-bikes, which has been very popular, and then in distributed resources, which is primarily our solar and storage work, both in residential and a heavy emphasis also with local governments. Next slide. Quickly recapping some of the achievements, and I think one of the really important things to call out here is we've seen a pretty dramatic shift in uptake in our programs, moving to really what's been a post-pandemic economy, number one. Number two is some pretty significant program changes over the last, really the third and fourth quarter of last year. which have been quite helpful in driving uptake. And then the third piece, of course, is the Inflation Reduction Act, which really drove a lot of awareness in addition to incentives. And so quickly recapping here, we have crossed the threshold of 1,000 appliances installed through our incentive program. That means both heat pump water heaters and heat pump space heating. 60% of that has been this calendar year. Next one, EV charging. Similarly, we have seen a significant acceleration and uptake in our program. We crossed the threshold of 500 ports to date. We're still seeing substantial pipeline, so over 3,600 ports in our pipeline. Really significant outcomes in terms of cost effectiveness, given our strategy, and I can speak more to that if there are questions. And then our solar and storage on public facilities. We're now in contract, we've contracted in the first round. Construction design is being completed, permitting is being completed. We will move into construction very soon. And for the second round, we will be issuing the RFP here imminently. Next slide.
Wait, before you go on.
Yes.
I think one thing that would be really helpful, those are obvious categories and good categories to address, which you've addressed for a long time. But I think it would be really helpful to set a baseline, because we've had the announcements of 1,000 appliances and 500 EV ports, which are kind of demarcation lines. What I'd like to see is from when each program started, not when we designed it, but when you first did one, launched one, show it in 6-month increments, how many we had for each one of those categories. And that will sort of set the baseline for us. I mean, the past is not particularly relevant, but going forward, we've kind of hit a mark.
Yes.
So I think we ought to look at that every 6 months to see what the changes are.
That's a great suggestion. We'll make that change.
And let's maybe do that when we do the strategic plan update, right?
Yeah.
We can do it in
Yeah,
that
that makes
format.
sense.
Okay.
Makes perfect sense.
I'm taking notes. Great, thank you. Next slide. We also have, as all of you are aware, goals related to supporting underserved communities. It is an important emphasis for us. That includes a target of a minimum of 20% of our investments being in this area. We've had continual, I wouldn't say large, but moderate uptake within our EV rebate program. This is quite important in the context of vehicles being very expensive generally in the market during the pandemic period, where costs went up in the used car market 50%. They declined slightly, but not to pre-pandemic levels. And this is far and away the biggest economic opportunity from the standpoint of delivering economic value to participant customers. We have the home upgrade program, which is now moving along at a pretty good clip, 190 homes. This is really the first stage of this program, which is going to be scaling, and I will be speaking to that here in a moment. And then e-bikes, probably far and away our most popular program. Every time we open it, it's pretty much immediately subscribed. And we're closing out the third round of that program now, and over 650 bikes have already been purchased with incentives from this program. We always get very, very positive response from participants in this program.
I have a question.
Yes.
Under the EV rebates, the 3.6 million in savings, is that equal to 3.6 million in rebates provided?
So thank you for the question. This represents the savings of a person who would have otherwise been spending money on gas and are now spending less on their transportation costs. And the significance here is that transportation is typically the second largest household expense. So this is real money in people's pockets.
I would just say fuel savings.
Yeah, so we should clarify that.
And I'd add a bullet about what the aggregate amount of the rebates have been. As well as a bullet on under the home upgrades, what the aggregate costs have been for. The 190 homes is, we've touched 190 homes with some form of rebate.
That's correct. That's correct.
But you're asking, it would be helpful to have the dollars, right? Like the aggregate dollars there, is that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for all.
How much we've
two,
spent.
for
How much
e-bikes.
we've spent
In every, yeah.
Sure.
in each one of the categories. I think.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And on the e-bikes, do we follow up to see like, are people using them and, you know, do they are safe based on our community?
Yes, so we do both a 1 month follow-up survey and a 6 month follow-up survey. And the 1 month follow-up is geared towards the experience of the program itself, the transaction. And then the 6 month is focused on the product and their experience with the product. So we are gathering that data. We get a pretty good response rate, typically about 30% response rate on the surveys. Next slide. Innovation pilots, so these are technology-focused efforts that we have. Our largest underway at this time is EV managed charging. It's a huge opportunity for load shifting. And we're in the middle now of our second round pilot on this and seeing some good initial data, but still a lot of work ahead here for gathering results from this pilot. The second one is development of methodology around building electrification. We published in the last few weeks guidelines for how to electrify within 100 amps and identify where it may not be feasible and where panel upgrades are appropriate. There's a substantial misperception that if you have 100 amps, you need to upgrade the panel or increase the service capacity, which often is in fact not true. We're also piloting the 120 volt water heater, which are one element that can be useful in doing home electrification. And then the last one is we're in the closing stages of a pilot, the advanced home systems and integrated space and water heating system from a company called Harvest Thermal. We're seeing very good results out of that. And the final measurement and verification report is going to be completed here within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Next slide.
Can
Wait.
we go back?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just curious, the advanced home system pilot, Harvest Thermal. So are we spending $22,000 to $23,000 per house? So we've done 4 installs, is that right?
So for the pilot, we cover the full cost.
Okay, and these are, how were these installed? How do we decide who for our pilot?
So there were a set of criteria that we laid out at the beginning here. We're talking 18 months ago, roughly. We did a appeal to a kind of, I'm going to say, innerish circle of customers who had, and partly networking through the CAC and other forums. So we selected a set of customers that we thought were in kind of optimal conditions where this might go through, and then we evaluated those customers to see that, you know, their home conditions were appropriate, and they're also, you know, personally motivated in a way that we felt was going to be supportive to then select the finalists there. That was, the finalists were selected by the company themselves, so we weren't choosing them ourselves. Basically, we wanted to figure out if the system worked, not figure out where all the possible problems could be. So our goal was to say, well, what are the optimal places where these would work, and then assess the system under those circumstances.
I have a question. So on the first one, that's a big opportunity, right? This
Yes.
is 200, if I understand, we've got 40,000 EVs in our service territory. So it's a 280,000 kilowatt hour opportunity to shift out of that. at some point, we need to have the time where you really walk us through how you're doing
Absolutely.
that and what your strategy is around that.
We will.
That's a potential
There's a
game
study
changer.
underway.
It's a huge, and this particular project is jointly with researchers out of UC Davis. And our
Okay.
intention is to both assess, what the potential is, but also what's the optimal program design. So we're assessing a whole range of different incentive mechanisms. And we do see the opportunity there in terms of distributed load shaping. It's larger than anything else.
But to be really honest, I assume we have 40,000 EVs in our service territory, but we don't have 40,000 EVs that are charging at peak. My guess, I mean, there's a lot of people who have EVs that are already, many EVs allow you to set up when it charges.
Yes,
So you just plug it in and it charges it off peak if you've gone to the effort
yes,
to program that.
yes.
So there's some reduced number of EVs that are charging at peak. So it's probably not really a 280,000 kilowatt hour opportunity.
Yes, that's right. But we know that only a minority of EV drivers today are timing their charging.
Okay, so that all of that's pretty.
Somewhere around 30%. I will need to get Philip in here to give you precise numbers, but
Well, when he does that, we should do it at a board meeting and ask the members of the board how many are programming.
yeah,
I mean, which you would assume that members of this board, a much higher percentage are programming than the general public, but it would be an interesting question.
yeah,
As soon as they have garages too.
True. So, yeah, if they're,
I would love to, but I can't.
right.
Good though. And I think the feedback there is also helping understand the assumption.
Yeah.
Around, it's probably not all 40,000,
oh,
although.
no, definitely
although-
not. So
although-
there's clearly, yes, and only a certain number would participate with any program that we put out, so that's the maximal technical potential. But even then, it will be much larger than fixed storage for residential, or any other option we have for load shaping.
Rocco, when is this, because I know we're just in the middle of, actually, we're sort of at the beginning, right? So what is the timeline when it might make sense to come back to the board?
I think a midpoint review is probably something with their report that is something that we could provide within, I would say, 3 to 4 months. I'd want to check with Philip on that. We're still in the recruitment phase for the pilot, and the data collection is intended to run 9 months.
Yeah, we got a ways. Okay,
Go off
I don't
topic.
go for it.
Yeah, but on that alone, would that make sense as a sort of campaign to reach out to the community? And also help branding as well, right? Just to get folks educated about the benefit of charging off peak hour. It'll also help our branding as well.
Thank you for that feedback. Next slide. So we wanted to also use this opportunity to call out how programs, at least as we're thinking about it internally, will need to change and marketing will need to change as we look to the future. And there are 3 major things that we'd like to call out here. Next. One is we want to move towards much more of a customer first approach. So most of our programs are very transactional. Somebody does something, they send us an application and we send them a check, and that's all well and good. It's very broadcast oriented for most of our programs. People need to come to us. And really, if we look at scale and the need for scale, is we need to meet people where they are. We need to be more data driven in terms of finding the right way to engage people who are in different places. Use that data to assess and constantly refine what we're doing. So there's a whole set of concepts under the hood here. But the intention is we must need to become much more customer centric.
Can I make a comment on that? I read something just this weekend and it was about doesn't matter the topic, whether enforcement works.
Hmm.
Any type of things, and they did a full psychological study. And they learned that if you say, you can't do this and you shouldn't do this, people will do it if they get away with it. If they're perceived as being seen publicly, then they'll comply. But the greatest success was peer pressure saying, we do the right thing. That had the greatest acceptance, overwhelmingly. So where we're dealing with this negative PR about gas, and in my community, I'm hearing it constantly. Somebody just recently told me they just put in all new gas appliances that I would never thought would be doing that. That's plenty of money. Just, I like gas and I'm not gonna buy any for this. I think the peer pressure, when you talk about coming into communities that face value, people who are making the change, it builds this momentum. So that it's not, you have to do this because everyone's saying, oh, that deadline, and I have to give up my gas appliances. But more that this is your neighbors who are making this change. This is your county. These are the people who are making the change. So the more publicity we have, what you just talked about on programs is really important, which you suggested.
Yeah, and also to your point too, perhaps the campaign would be how to spin that positive message about how good electrical appliances are, right, and what it can achieve in compared to what people are used to, which is gas appliances, and how it improves their lives. Those are going to be more easier to resonate with those messages. For example, gas appliances, opportunity of having carbon monoxide, for example, right? How some folk may be allergic to it. For example, right? Those electrical appliances get rid of those issues, and that needs to be showcased as part of outreach. It's part of the educational process. It's
Okay, so-
who it is.
So the point here is that you're gonna reorient to make customers first.
And I would say we've already, been trying to work in that direction, but we need to get much better at it. And part of it is, not just the messaging, it's also the tools and ways people can reach us, and the character of the interaction and how we use information to constantly improve how we're building relationships.
Great.
That's leading to something.
So the next item, your next is, as I mentioned already, is becoming more data driven. We've already started moving in this direction, establishing a data warehouse, having more information that helps us develop really targeted insights about who our customers are, what their needs are, to align with those needs. And then I mentioned the surveys that we're getting back, which is part of that feedback loop, and really using that feedback loop now that we are actually getting a little more scale in the programs. We can use that feedback loop to inform and refine our programs. And then lastly, next, is of course, all of this builds towards scalability. And part of that is providing more in the way of digital tools for customers. And I'm going to be speaking to that in terms of some of the next steps of building in particular is going to be an important part of this. But all of this is about building relationships with customers and bringing scale to what we're doing.
Just for your custom first.
Yeah.
First custom is great, but what I'm finding is just you gotta make it easy for people too. So I would just put it easy, like easy. Accessibility, sweet, and coordinating, I just brought Rick this and Sean, because I got it in my minute box, like, I don't know if anybody else got this. Mitsubishi Electric has a Fuse program called Fuse. And it said, would like to notify you of available massive rebates by Peninsula Clean Energy, Clean Tech, and Bayron. House heating, cooling, heat pumps, replace gas, water, heating furnace, gives all the rebates. And then it's like a 4-page deal of, you call us and we'll come out and we'll take care of everything for you. It's turnkey deal. which I thought was pretty cool because we didn't do it, but we're in it. And like figuring out how to partner with more organizations like this who are willing to do this. Well, and I just brought that for Raphael.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Koch Brothers did the same. They
Right.
sent one out by people.
It's like, thank God for it.
Mhm.
That's great, yeah. Fuse is a contractor, one of the largest participant contractors in our appliance rebate program. So this is great. We'll definitely look into it.
Go ahead.
I love the way we're thinking about this. It goes along with that we need to do the one-stop shop. That when somebody's thinking of anything of some conversion, that somehow or another, we should be able to tell our communities, go to PCE, we got that. We got that, we got that. So whatever the need is, that we have the capacity and the options to inform our communities, like, you need to call PCE and getting that message
And
out
even
there.
where we
and
don't.
building upon it.
Even when we don't, then we know where to direct them,
Right,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just sort of letting them fall off the cliff,
Right.
right? Here's where you need to go for that.
because there's so many different vendors out there that are trying to do the solar things, like the billing that. What I've been asked is, well, who do I go to? Like, which is the best one? And it's like, well, I honestly don't know who the best one is, and who's reliable, who can do that for you. It's like, I don't know. I haven't yet been able to come up. I have a very small house, and a very small roof, and it's like the balance between.
I think that is the customer experience. People don't know.
Right.
So, and even getting this, that's just a one-stop shop. We're gonna be a more trusted partner. And to the extent we can tell people, it's gonna move things.
Yeah, that we have vetted these vendors and then building that trust, like, well, you go here because this is a nonprofit and we have to build that trust.
That is a perfect segue.
Yeah, that's where we're going.
Better.
Okay, let's move on because we have a lot to do.
We have
Next slide. Next slide.
the new development.
So as part of the analysis work that was done last year around the 2035 decarbonization, there were also a set of recommendations that the board endorsed in terms of more flexibility, higher touch support, including the one-stop shop concept, and better links to finance opportunities. And here I'm talking specifically in the building sector, residential building sector. So next slide. Some of you may recall, we did a presentation to the board back in March around building electrification version 2. We are now coming very close to releasing the RFP for a major component of this, and so we wanted to update directors on this. As a reminder, building electrification version 2 envisions the option for whole home electrification, not a requirement, but the option. More homes being done, services including the one-stop shop, live technical assistance, and turnkey services such as those being offered here by Fuse. And it could be Fuse or it could be somebody else. Next slide. So some of you may remember this is kind of the grand conceptual vision. I'm not going to go through every box. The idea is meeting people, customers where they are and being more customer first in our approach. And there are three major categories that we want to support. Is customers that want to choose all of the components of their project, whether or not to have a contractor, what specific product they want to install. They might even be DIY. We want to support those customers. We also have customers that just want it to be done. They don't want to get into the weeds or they're dealing with an emergency replacement. We don't serve these customers very well today. It's it can be complicated and confusing. But we want to serve those customers. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we're supporting those who may need more financial support to move in this direction. I'm not going to go through every box. But the one-stop shop website is a major component of this. We're in now the requirements process of working with a consultant through the marketing team. We want to put in place what we previously described as the hotline and now are calling a concierge. This is the on-call. Can you help me answer these questions on how to get this done? And then the turnkey install option. Call us, we'll get it done. Don't worry about it. So the RFP I mentioned will be for the turnkey service, and we're still evaluating exactly how the concierge is going to move forward. We have been thinking an external resource, but maybe an internal resource might actually have better quality, and so we're starting to lean in that direction. And then, of course, the one-stop shop, and then the rebates and the financing options and everything else would support this and come in stages starting next year. Next slide. I'm sorry.
Quick question. Go back. So I cannot afford this low income.
Yes.
So I think it's more than just low income. I think you need to say low moderate income, because I will tell you at $20,000 or more to redo all this, but full house and everything. That's two school teachers who are not low, they're gonna be moderate income.
Yeah.
They're not gonna be able to afford it. So, I would say in my community, 60-70% of people can't afford it. So I think we need to figure out I cannot afford this and expand it beyond low income. Whether it's the rebates or the help and the assistance, but there's a lot in that.
And it could be that that's a scalable solution, right? Depending on income.
Yes.
So but you're still getting that support. It
Right,
might not be paying for the entire thing,
right,
but it would be on a scale.
right.
Great, thank you. Next slide. Now, one thing, this is a new element, so we've previously spoken with, presented to board members, the prior elements that I described and gotten input on that. One of the new elements as we dig into this that we're starting to recognize is the need to have a more integrated call center. So right now, today, we contract with Calpine that does all our billing and data operations for billing and accounts. And they offer very good service within their various particular silos. So if anybody calls the 800 number and has account related or billing related question, they're very, very good at that, but they can't answer anything else. Anything about programs, they just send us an email, there's another transaction. It can happen days later, although we try to be as quickly as possible, move as quickly as possible. So this and each of our individual programs has its own silo today. We cannot offer quality service this way in the context of a much more robust customer offering. We can't say, oh, did you know you could get solar this way? Or did you know that you can get technical assistance on this question? I see that your bills are high. Have you considered a different rate and then doing this? So that sort of integrated conversation can't happen in the current support environment that we have. So we will be coming back to the board, not this month, but next month, we're looking to come back to the board with a proposed plan to bring our call center services in-house and then offer a full range of support to any inbound call or email as listed here. So all of the account, related questions, but then program related questions all can happen in one place. So in the interest of time, we won't again be going into detail here, but I can certainly answer some questions, and then we'll be coming back to the full board, executive committee, and then full board with details on this proposal.
Have you thought about the fiscal impact of that?
That's
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the things that we will be presenting this.
Can I suggest that like Donna brought up about middle income and offering financial assistance or incentives. When we do that, one of the things that makes this powerful in terms of, again, a peer pressure, in our community, we have some people who've gone through PCE contractors. So when we did our house, I contacted those people. They gave me a load of information, suggestions, what they went through. I'd like to see maybe we ask that those customers that utilize our services, whether they're willing to talk peer to peer to their neighbors, because that often solidifies the decision people make on whether they want to make this leap, whether they financially can handle it, what are the hidden things that they didn't think about. And it's an extra assurance, because it's someone you know that you believe you can count on.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Sonoma Clean Power does that with their grid savvy, it's EV, but it's the same kind of, they form sort of a subgroup that the staff doesn't have to manage. But it's like putting in touch with the neighbors,
The other.
like a support group.
Right, it's just like that. The other thing is, in-house technical, a lot of people who get very curious about going electric. But they don't have the security, to get on the phone, and I've had residents say, oh, I called PCE and it's just too technical, I can't make sense of it. If we had an outreach team that went to every city with a couple contractors, invite the contractors, so that the contractors are there to answer questions. And maybe someone, along with the people who actually made electric conversions, so there's some neighbors, there's some contractors, it could be a whole discussion about how you do this, what it costs, how they overcame certain costs, and PCE reps. I think that builds that framework that makes it snowball. Yeah, exactly. So it could be advertised as, you're curious about this, you want to know if you can afford it, come talk to your neighbors, some contractors who do this kind of work, and some PCE reps. Because banks have done that with mortgages where they had, first time home buyers, so it's
Right.
pretty popular.
I think in presenting on the idea of bringing the call center in-house, you need to allow for more than one discussion on that. It's not a discuss and decide issue. It's going to be a bigger issue for the board. And I think that you should look at, it looks like this proposal is to answer all inbound 800 calls.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether customer is just general customers, it's not program specific. But I think you should look at it, what you're proposing, and look at a separation between questions that would be Calpine data, billing related versus program related.
There definitely will be tiers, so, for example,
What I'm saying is the board might want to leave the Calpine related stuff with Calpine and be very specific to bring in the program related stuff, which is totally different. And which they're not able to answer, and they're just sending you, emails or texts now.
Maybe a couple of options.
And I think you gotta give some options.
Yeah. We have a lot more than this.
I'm
This
sure
is
you do.
merely
And
introducing
This is a
the
big
concept.
discussion, I understand.
Yeah, so we've got more slides on this. The idea here is it's very segmented. So we want to make sure that the customer is not bouncing around from Calpine to RHA to whoever the other vendors are to staff. It's trying to figure out a way to streamline the whole thing.
Yeah.
Make it a better experience for the customer and make sure that it is not
Exactly.
a huge investment for us, although it is. And we have some avoided costs, but work is still underway. And there are a couple of CCAs that have moved in this direction, so we'll provide you all.
To me, that makes a lot of sense, and I think what you're talking about, Colleen, is sort of a little slightly different situation and topic. And you should talk to our CEP, Citizen Environmental Council in Burlingame, because they've done 3 or 4 of them. We've done a bunch of them. Desiree's on the CSB, you figure it out. The biggest issue you're gonna have with that is it's like the enthusiasts come, but the other people don't know. So you gotta figure out how to do that. Which could be this.
Great, thank you. Next slide. Some timeframes, as we have them conceived currently, the topmost bar is related to the one-stop shop website. As I mentioned, we have requirements development underway at this time, led by the marketing team. We're hoping to have probably in second quarter, the first phase of the one-stop shop website. in play, and we see expanding that over time. We are, in terms of the internal discussions, assuming the board approves, we are hoping to bring up the call center next year, probably late second quarter, third quarter, in line with the other elements of the turnkey service and concierge, which are, the call center would be an important part of supporting those services. And then the dark blue line relates to the turnkey service specifically. As I mentioned, the RFP is about to be issued for that. There will be some design, contracting and design work. And then we are looking to start bringing that up, beginning hopefully by the second quarter of next year. And part of the goal here is also to have these programs up and running to make best use of the Inflation Reduction Act and state incentives that are also coming up. So there are timing issues associated with all of these components. Next slide. There are some additional plans in other areas. In the interest of time, I'm just going to run through these quickly. As I mentioned, we have the second round of solar and storage on public buildings. That is going to RFP imminently. Managed charging, which we will come back and do a full report to the board. We envision that in next year moving to a general program once we've gathered all of the insights from the pilot. We do see the need, third bullet here, for replacing the existing residential solar and storage program, which has, done some good, but we've learned a lot. And there's more to say there once we come back with more detail, and we'll provide a fuller update for the board. And then the local government electrification program, which we want to speak to you next about. Blake's ready to present on that. We have opportunities for solar. We have opportunities for electric vehicle support. We don't have anything for the facilities themselves today, and that's what we want to talk to you about. Next slide.
Just on local government electrification, to go back for a second. So this weekend, one of my good friends, her son is a police officer in Menlo, and he was given an electric truck to use. But he can't use it because he doesn't live in St. Clair County, and where he lives, they don't have EV charging. So he's having a really big problem of trying to figure out how to charge that truck when he's in. I don't know how to deal with it. I just want to kind of let you know. It's one of they're finding it's an issue because he drives it home like it's in El Dorado Hills. So you go from Menlo to El Dorado Hills, you can get one way, and he has no charging capability to turn around. There's an emergency.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to maybe take our first responders here who are getting electric vehicles and help them set up EV charging in their homes, regardless of where they are, whether they're in San Mateo County or not, might be really helpful so that we can convert our fleets.
Interesting. I will definitely bring that up with Bill.
Mel,
Yes,
sorry, your next slides are budget.
yes,
I'm gonna ask you to be pretty brief
yes,
because it's a recap of what has
Yes.
already been approved.
yes.
And I want to make sure we get to that.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a couple of things from now.
And you have two public hearings too.
Great, thank you. Next slide. We have here the approved fiscal year budget and 5-year forecast. And you'll see also the top section, which is what's in the program budget. And then the bottom section is what's in the capital assets, the column. I'm probably not describing this exactly right. But the point being that the upper section is what appears in the program line of the budget. These are funds going out the door. The bottom section are assets, which are essentially financing that we are providing, and that is money that's gone out and is coming back. So it's not treated as a budget expense, it's treated as an asset on the balance sheet. And that's specifically for our on-bill finance, which is residential electrification supporting funds and energy efficiency. And then the solar and storage on public buildings, which are power purchase agreements where the funds come back to us after we've done the capital outlay, are in the bottom line. And that includes both round 1 and round 2. What I want to call out on the budget overall is, and the forecast is, as I mentioned, we've moved into a post-pandemic economy. We are seeing significant ramp up and align with our 2035 plans. This is a period of growth from the standpoint of the program's budgets as envisioned. And we are looking at services such as our turnkey services and other elements being very important, of course, driving this adoption and driving the decarbonization objectives that we have. Next slide. This slide is intended to summarize the benefits that are being delivered under the 5-year forecast. So again, in the interest of time, we won't go through all of these in detail. But we have in the rightmost columns, greenhouse gas save, and also the economic benefit that's being delivered to these customers through these programs. This is not a comprehensive view, but it covers most of the big items. And then in the bullets underneath, we're still maintaining our targets in terms of low-income community investments and itemizing here for you which programs are specifically low-income targeted. That's e-bikes and home upgrade, and then some of the other programs have low-income supporting dimensions to those programs. Next slide. And then there's some additional backup slides for more detail, which I would be happy to offer answer questions on as desired offline.
We have time to go into that, but I want to take public comment. Dave, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thank you, Rick, for letting me speak. Hey, I just have a couple questions. Raphael talked about the government RFP be released with imminently. Is there like a timeline, a date on that? Imminently is a broad term. And also the same thing with residential version 2 RFP. And then next thing is the PowerPoint that you just presented. Is that going to be available online? So 3 questions.
Yeah, to your third point, yes, it will be available online. It's all Nellie's saying currently. So it's already there under the meetings, the executive committee meetings information. And with regards to the 2 RFPs, both of those we hope to have out this month.
This month for the 2 RFPs. The PowerPoint is not online at this time.
All right, well,
Executive committee.
yeah, under the executive committee, and we can send those slides, a link to the slides to you, Dave.
That would be-
in case, there's an issue on our side.
Yeah, that would be good because I looked at the on the website and it didn't have a presentation for this meeting. So just let you know.
We'll get that up there and get it out to you.
Okay, no worries. All right, thank you, Raphael. So this month for the RFPs, you said?
That's the goal. It could slide into September, but our goal is this month.
Oh, this October. Are you talking August?
I'm sorry. It's intended to go out this month, but it could slide to September.
Okay, August, September. Okay. All right. Thank you, Raphael. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, I can't read it, but I think it's Michael.
Barber, it's Michael Barber. Okay.
Thanks, Rick. This Michael Barber, work for Supervisor Pine. I attend a lot of the RICAPS meetings and work with Blake and others. And something that I've emphasized a lot is our penetration of contractors and retailers is not working. You just watch a Giants game. They're like commercials for appliance vendors, Davies Appliances, Atherton Appliances. I'm pretty sure most of these are Peninsula appliance stores. They're all promoting gas appliances. And if we want to install, it's great to talk neighbor to neighbor, but most people are not following this. It's I call a contractor, come out, fix my water heater, put my water heater in or whatever. And most of those contractors are still having people install gas. So that's just the point. If we've got to penetrate the people selling this stuff, and I just don't see that happening. So That's my only comment. Thank you.
We're very early days.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Is there any other public comment? Yeah, I don't see any other public comment. I didn't ask for public comment at the very beginning of the meeting, so if anyone has a comment not on this item that they wanted to make in general public comment, now would be a good time to do it. See any of that public comment. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the local government building electrification program.
Okay, this one is an extension of what you just learned about, responsive to feedback we received from the board about the next phase of how PCE can support local government electrifications at public facilities. So I believe Blake is going to lead this, correct?
That's great.
Okay, Blake, you're up.
Thank you very much, directors, for your time. As discussed, we're going to talk through our proposed local government building electrification program. Next, please. Our recommendation is to establish a local government building electrification program to electrify local government facilities. The recommendation to the board for program approval is a $5 to $10 million seed funding for a revolving loan fund, which I'll have more detail on later. And the budget status currently is an incentive included in the approved fiscal year 24 budget and continuing of 500 to 2 million per year. So discussing both a loan and an incentive. I'm going to ask to hold your questions till the end as details will emerge as I go through the presentation. I'll go through this very quickly. Next, please. Here's the agenda, some context for local governments, the need for flexible incentives, funding concepts, proposed program, some cost examples, and the timeline. Next, please. Many of our local governments have goals to decarbonize government buildings. Here I've pulled Millbrae's Climate Action Plan, an excerpt from the plan. In order to lead by example, all new construction projects in the city will be all electric. And here are some examples of new construction. Existing has been a little more difficult. Next. Local governments are struggling to fund electrification efforts at these buildings. Here I have 6 examples, and it appears I have deleted two of the notes on them. At the top left, we have the East Palo Alto Government Center, San Mateo Animal Shelter, some pool projects, a Los Banos Library, and the Youth Center. A couple of these have government PV planned, and that's interesting because government solar, building electrification, and electrifying fleets can go really well together in some of these facilities with cost savings. Next. Local governments have some of the most varied portfolios I've ever seen. Here's an example of the types of buildings that local governments have to manage specific to our county. Because of this, a one-size-fits-all incentive that focuses on specific equipment like our residential rebates isn't well suited for this type of portfolio. We're recommending a more flexible incentive. Next, please. An electrification revolving loan fund. On the right here, why local governments have specified the need for access to loans. Government budgets are limited. Individual projects are the wrong size for one-off traditional financing structures, which have been tried. They're a little bit too small, but too big since they're not residential. The California Energy Commission loan is too restrictive. And gas replacement programs in the capital improvement pipeline are typically underfunded to enable electrification. So there are already capital improvement budgets approved for projects for gas to gas replacement. You could use some extra access to money for electrification. The way this would work is we would apply seed funding, and then from that, governments could pull funding and then pay back, similar to how our loan process works now, except there would be a dedicated fund allocation. Next, please. Why local governments need access to incentives. Think about this as though we have the 0% loan program for residential and also the rebates. Electrification does not always have a payback. It typically saves money, but not necessarily enough to cover the whole project. Governments cannot take out unlimited loans. So incentives may be needed in certain cases. Cities have noted a need for a mix of both loan and incentives as options. Next, please. We're looking at a $16 per therm savings. So therm is a unit measured to sell gas. To give you an idea what that means in metric tons, every 1,000 therms of gas saved per year translate to roughly 5 metric tons of CO2 emissions per year. And on the right, I just happen to have the gas use for a lot of county buildings for San Mateo County. I'm showing the greenhouse gas emission savings if each of those projects were to completely go to zero. And then the associated maximum incentive size based on the $16 per therm number. You're seeing a lot there in the tens of thousands and a few in the hundreds of thousands in terms of what they could get at that $16 per therm number. Next, please.
Wait a second, before you leave that slide, it's impossible to read it. So like the slide has on the left different facilities, is that right? It looks like courtyard, craft shop. I can't read them, but, and then the next column is that therms used per year?
Yeah, so the GHG savings is metric tons because that's what we care about. And then this incentive would be, let's take, I guess the top building, superintendent of schools. If they went to zero gas use, they would save 172 metric tons. And based on the $16 per therm number, the incentive that that building uses a lot of gas would get 500,000. I'm using the
Yeah, but what that doesn't show is what they would spend in electricity costs. They're not getting the electricity for free. So it's not that they're just saving $518,000. They're spending something for electricity.
Yes.
So really what this is showing is the amount of greenhouse gases that they're saving, which is real. But the dollars don't, you know, they're not that helpful without knowing what the costs are they're incurring.
Yeah, this is thank you. Thank you, Director DeGolia. This is purely meant to be illustrative of the amount of money in a from a capital perspective that it would be. I would say this is not the most, this doesn't show the whole picture at all. I agree.
But I don't understand the therms is an operating cost. It's not a capital cost, right? I mean, the therms are what they're spending now in their operating budget to provide the energy to either heat or cool those facilities. I assume that's what that is. So that's an operating cost, not a capital cost.
If I may, Chair DeGolia, the intention here just for this slide is to say how the incentive might be structured, and that the incentive would be structured to focus on projects with the maximum GHG reduction. So, and we can measure the therms, that's the usage. So for example, pools, just to give one example, are an excellent greenhouse gas opportunity, and those would naturally tend to rise to the top. It will encourage, this sort of structure will encourage cost effectiveness of greenhouse gas reduction.
I don't see any pools up there.
This is just intended to be illustrative of the range of different projects and potential.
I get that, but if the pools are the most attractive, they need to be up there. They're not even up there.
So I think what we will do in the next round is use a pool example, A, and B, include the projected cost of sort of electrification. So not just the capital expensive conversion, but the operating costs
The electricity.
based on, I mean, it's a little bit presumptive, right? But based on potentially today's cost.
Yeah.
We can do that. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think that's what.
Okay. Got it? That is? Okay. Go ahead, Blake.
Apologies for that being confusing. Next slide.
No problem. Confusing.
Thank you for the question.
Needs the rest.
Yeah.
An example of what this could look like, so a rooftop package unit is a type of gas-fired equipment. I believe you're being either heated or cooled at the moment by two, which are on the roof of Peninsula Clean Energy. A project that might have 8 rooftop gas units and a heat pump water heater. The total cost to replace all that equipment might be $200,000 and would save 11 metric tons per year. That type of project, and this is a hypothetical one, but grounded in real costs, would have access to 32,000 in incentives. If the city were to cover half of that cost out of regular maintenance for replacing that equipment, they could also take out a $68,000 loan to pay back, that would be paid back over 7 years. So this is an example of a cost share that might be fairly typical. I'm going to go into the next slide to get into more detail on what we're specifically proposing for the incentive and loan side. Next slide, please. Proposing a revolving loan fund with a 7-year loan term, an interest rate of 0 to 2%, so a low interest rate, 5 to 10 million in seed funding, a cap of, this is written differently in the board memo, 600,000 per project. That could be combined with the incentive and would require a 25% cost share by non-PCE funds. Next slide, or which will make something appear. Then the incentive program, $1 million per year in current budget. There's 750 allocated in 24, up to $16 per therm per year saved. I might note that in metric tons to make it simpler for the board to understand in the next presentation. $600,000 cap per project or per city per year, and would require a 25% cost share by non-PCE funds. We want to prioritize projects based on urgency, shovel readiness, total savings, and showcase projects. I'm going to skip to the next slide to save some time and get to questions. The benefits will be energy cost savings. So for a pool project, might save up to 30,000 per year in energy costs. And most projects will see some cost savings from electrification. Adding on-site PV makes that better. Funding for building improvements will be very helpful. These funding requests will estimate to impact 30 to 90 projects over 10 years. Really depends on the project size. Help with deferred maintenance costs and electrification at difficult buildings. The projected emission savings is 500 to 3,000 metric tons per year. So in the pool example, a pool heater has similar emissions to 100 homes. And a small rec center would have similar emissions to about 4 homes. Next slide. The timeline, there's only one slide after this. We presented to CAC May 2023. Now we're finalizing the program. We would like to open the grant process later this year, select projects later this year as well for funding this year, and then funding will be available to local governments next year. Next slide. So back to the recommendation, and I'll take questions.
And if I may jump in, I want to make sure it's clear that this would be, rather than a rolling program, it would be an annual application process. And then projects would be selected based on the criteria that Blake just quickly ran through. But cost effectiveness and urgency, shovel readiness would be among the criteria for the projects that would be supported any given year.
Questions?
Make sure we share the slides first of all.
What's that?
Make sure we share the slides after the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said interest rate is 0 to 2% for the previous slide? Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, what's the variable there?
The variable is really feedback from directors, and it could be 0% like our current 0% loan for residents. On the other hand, there might be some value in at least recouping our administrative costs. So that's the question, and we would welcome guidance from directors on that question.
So I've got two questions and a couple comments. One is, are you proposing the funding, the 500,000 to $2 million? First of all, I assume all that money that would be funded is already in the budget.
The incentive dollars are in the budget, but not the revolving loan. So, ultimate, so
I think if you're proposing to take money that's not in the budget, it's got to wait until the surplus funds committee has done its review. Rather than assume that we're going to reduce the amount of money that the surplus funds committee could look at by taking money that's not in the budget. That's my opinion. Are you in this program? It's not clear to me if the funding is proposed to enable the municipalities to replace the current gas appliance with electric appliances. Or if it's both to, that's a capital cost, obviously, whether it's both a capital cost and you're also proposing to provide dollars to pay for the electricity.
no, only the capital costs.
Okay, then I think all of the analysis about the savings that you show on greenhouse gases, it's 100% good. On dollars, it's not valid at all. Because it's not real, I don't know how the savings is. There's gonna be costs, but they're gonna have to pay off a loan. And they're going to incur costs to operate those appliances.
Right,
And
and
there's a comparison of the cost to operate the appliances versus the gas appliances.
Right.
Are you assuming that the electric appliances will be cheaper to operate than the gas appliances? Because that's not what I get from the market.
yeah, the difference in operating costs, and Blake can speak to this in detail, but it's gonna vary significantly depending on the specific building situation and systems that are involved. In general, gas costs are on a per unit basis, have been extremely volatile. Typically 3 to 4 times less expensive on a per unit basis than electricity, but heat pumps are generally 3 to 4 times more efficient. Usually, in many cases, there is a margin of savings.
Gas is 3 to 4 times cheaper than electricity
On a per
on a
unit.
per energy unit.
That's correct.
Well, that's totally different than anything I've heard in the market, including when we met with Bellows. I mean,
And Blake, you can maybe expand on that.
Yeah,
everybody who says it's way more expensive. That I haven't talked to anyone who says that the operation of their electricity systems and replacement of gas is cheaper.
But we're definitely seeing it in the analysis that we have done.
That's good. I want it. That's valuable.
Yes, on the residential side, it really depends. Gas prices change every month. So it really depends on the month. We are seeing on the residential side, very small savings in our analysis. And then in other places like municipal utilities in California or across the country, there's almost always savings. So it really has to do with the high electricity costs of PG&E transmission and delivery. I will add that municipal buildings and commercial buildings have lower electric rates to residential, but similar gas rates. So the energy cost story is better for municipal and almost always savings when you add a heat pump versus gas.
Wait, but if you're talking the electricity from munis, yeah, then that makes sense, but that's relevant.
Blake referring to the electricity rates for commercial accounts is less. So the consequence, the savings are better. So actually, what I said was specific to residential accounts, and Blake's pointing out that commercial rates are better. So there's more savings to be had in commercial buildings.
Correct. Yeah, I wanted to ground you in residential because we know those numbers better. Commercial, the saving story is better because the electric rates are better and the gas rates are roughly the same.
This is good feedback though, because we can amend this presentation to include more analytics and operating projected operating costs on a hypothetical project.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
the
it
different
needs to
types
be
of
real, it needs to be made more real.
opportunities.
I have a question. When we talk about the continuation of selling gas plants and that mandate, is that including large scale boilers, furnaces used in large commercial buildings?
Well, there are rules that the air district has adopted, but have not yet taken effect. Which would, if they are put into effect, which is, there's still a process, there, in 2027, residential water heaters would be the first affected, and that would also affect small water heaters in like office buildings. And then we have in 2031, 2027, 2029, we have space heating systems. And then help me, Blake, in 2031, what's the third stage for the air district rule?
Large boilers that would account for large water heaters and also large space heating systems in commercial buildings. So 2031 is the big date for larger commercial buildings. The building that you're sitting in will be impacted by both the 2027 and 2029 rules.
So to Chair DeGoya's point, any municipality looking at their systems in all of their buildings, it's a good time to plan for both the solar and the replacement of all of these large
That's exactly right.
systems. Tandem with solar.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'll just say that's exactly what it's intended to do, actually, is to create several layers where PCE is supporting municipal facilities in their transition, in their fuel switch, with options to either just do a grant or do a grant and a loan. We were very clear in our discussions internally that we didn't want just another massive grant program, that we needed to do something that was sustainable over time, because we see that the demand for this sort of opportunity is growing. And then it should and can match up with our solar. And then batteries are obviously an authorized use of expenditure and would be part of the solar plus storage program if the city is involved in that. So I feel like it doesn't fully, and Blake had to go fast, but it is meant to be an integrated opportunity that supports cities in moving toward electrification. That's essentially what we're doing.
Yes, and I will add related to planning, we're working with RICAPS to download, RICAPS is helping to coordinate downloading each capital improvement plan for near-term planning from every city to see which projects could benefit from electrification or solar that are already on the books. So that's currently happening to help with communication between staff and public works on electrification.
So I think the other issue with electrification that we haven't addressed here, but I suspect we could, it is the risk of electrifying if the power grid goes down, which obviously this is something that lots of people, both including board members, have talked about since last winter. Because we have the municipal solar program, both the one that is about to be completed this year, early next year, and the one that we're launching. And the second one, there's more battery involvement. There's some protection for those municipalities that would electrify because they'd have backup. We haven't really put in place a microgrid strategy for them, I don't think, but that's a future thing we could look at. But at a minimum, to the extent that a municipality is putting in solar with battery backup, they've got some backup in the event that they go into this electrification program. And I know for my municipality, for example, they would only look at doing this if they had that backup, because they don't want to take the risk, they're gonna be out, and in which case they have to run a generator, which probably destroys the entire greenhouse gas analysis, savings analysis. So that, I think you kind of, we need to, when this comes to the board, that needs to be included in that process. Although I'd say for right, and one other comment is you've got ranges of dollars here. I'm not sure why we have ranges. I mean, if we're gonna create a program, it ought to be a county program with whatever, 500,000 or $1 million or $2 million rather than, if we're saying a range of 500,000 to 2 million, I think we're saying 2 million.
So, no, to be clear, it's 500,000 this year, and then it scales up to 2 million. So it's not really, we need to do a better job of just very precise
Well, this says
communication.
in 24 budget, so it should be whatever's in the 24 budget, or not whatever's in the future
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of discussion of this prior. We would like to suggest flexibility here that for programs to be able to adjust based on uptake and what's going on in other programs. So right now, what's in the budget is $750,000 in the fiscal year 24 budget, and then ramping up to $1 million. But that what exactly could be funded may depend that particular given year if there's uptake that's lower in a particular program. Another area that we might shift some funding there. So there's some flexibility that we're seeking here in terms of allocations rather than being very, very specific, which can then create challenges with regards to programs that may have low uptake and then not being able to accommodate demand somewhere else.
And there's a number of projects that you have in mind.
Well, we have a number of local governments that have approached us with interest. We don't know how much the demand is right now. Our supposition is that it could be quite high once the program opens, but we don't know that for sure yet.
But that's not my question.
I apologize.
Yeah, my question is, how many projects do you plan on?
Per year.
It depends on the size of the projects, so.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you're expecting 750 this year, right? That's what it's been allocated.
That's what's in the budget, that's right.
Right, are you looking to fund 5 projects, are you looking to fund 2 projects or 10? I mean.
It could be 2 to 5 projects, and it depends on the size of the projects that come through.
That's right, because some will be 100,000,
Right,
some will be 600K. So this is how much we have this year.
and you expect a 25% matching, right? I saw on previous slides.
That's what's proposed in the draft program, yes.
Okay, so this could fund as much as 75% of the project
Yes, for any given project, that's right.
for any given.
And that's both the incentives plus loan. So there's the matching piece would be that third part of that pie chart. So it's not all in incentives. There's a portion in incentives, there's a portion in loans, and then there's a portion that must be funded through other sources.
And I might amend Raphael's comment. Raphael, I think some years we'll see maybe 8 or 10 projects per year. So maybe 2 to 8 projects per year is a better estimate.
But this is a proposal for fiscal 24, am I right?
The proposal here is for an ongoing program. The incentive dollars are already in this fiscal year in the approved budget. The loan component has not been allocated. So the request to the board could ultimately be both authorizing the program A and then the allocation to the revolving fund.
Marty, do you have a question?
Yes, we're going to.
Go ahead, Marty. Go
All
ahead.
right. I really appreciate this. I know in my city that a lot of times we can't do things because we don't have the budget and it takes at least a year to kind of come up with a project of this scale. So I appreciate that as well. I think a $10 million revolving fund is probably the right amount. Being that there's 20 cities in our county and that $500,000 a year, that matches up with that 10 million, is that right? Getting the details worked out, and then as we're dealing with this surplus fund committee, I think this is something that that committee would fully support. The way I'm understanding, it's not just gas, it's all electrification of the projects that we're interested in doing. And I wanted to thank everyone for their comments, and I'm supporting.
Think you, we're gonna need to look to see if it's enough, and maybe we should put a trigger in there, so if the program is popular and fill up, that we can bring it back and, I don't wanna turn people down because we don't have money, because we do have money. So that's important. And two, on the list, you had a couple lists there. One was like municipal facilities. One thing that was not on there, which a lot of people have asked about here, is solar streetlights. So it's installation of solar streetlights. And then I would also add on that list, first responder chart, think about it, is first, what we just discussed is first responder charging in their homes in order for them to use an electrified fleet.
These are buildings, this is buildings. It's all buildings.
Oh, I see what you're saying, see the
Fuel
car, right. EV charging is different, okay, EV charging. is different.
Different program.
And there's,
The streetlights, I think, are not buildings, but they are kind of infrastructure.
there,
Okay, that's it.
We used to work with municipality a lot, but it says government there, so does it include school districts?
What is being proposed here at this point is that the first round, the member agencies.
Okay.
And then this could be opened up to other local governments at a subsequent point. We have included this as one of the items in the discussion with the surplus committee. Our aspiration, if you will, is that the board might be amenable to authorizing an initial component of this program, an initial revolving fund, and that the surplus committee could explore whether a larger allocation could be made. The reason we are coming now, even though the surplus committee conversations are in progress, is we do know that there are some local governments that are facing urgent gas system upgrades that they have to do imminently. And if they don't have some support, then they're going to have to put in new gas systems. And so there will be lost opportunity from the standpoint of those facilities. And so that's why there's a little bit of a timing issue.
I'd say if you know what those agencies are, it would be great to see a case study of one or two of those that show the comparative operating costs and what the specific installation costs are, so that we can actually look at the real numbers rather than kind of a hypothetical.
Yeah, and we have that. We would love to get direction from directors here. We didn't want to suggest that this is like a done deal for a given public agency, because we also want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity. But we do have some specific case studies, including the Brisbane and Millbrae, Menlo Park pools, where we've had quite a bit of conversation, and Blake may have some others.
Well, I'd say the ones that prioritize are the ones that are going to have to replace gas right away.
Yeah.
Rather than just a general. Just because a community is sort of at the front of doing it in terms of their political interest, that to me isn't the priority. The priority is if they're actually gonna upgrade to,
Or build it.
if they're right
That's
on the
the
bird.
list of criteria, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can
We just need more
certainly
time to
share
go through
the
this too.
case study without any.
We also do that, yeah.
Yeah, right. I think that's right.
Okay, is there any other comments? I've got two public comments. Let me take the public comment. Is it Adrian? I can't see the name. Is it Adrian?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, Chair DeGolia and honorable committee members. Adrian Etherton, Sustainability Manager for the City of Brisbane. I just wanted to thank you all and the PCE staff, especially Blake, for this proposal. It really is going to fill a very important gap in the funding and financing space for electrification projects. I'm cautiously optimistic that this program, if adopted as presented, would finally help Brisbane move forward with our community pool water heater electrification project. Since there's been a lot of questions about savings, that would actually save us 25 to 30,000 annually in operational costs for that pool, and would lead to a municipal operations emissions for our city of about 25%. I agree with the staff report that demand is likely to be larger than the proposed annual budgets. So if anything, please consider growing the program to meet that demand. But that said, I hope to see this program move forward as quickly as possible. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Adrian. Dave Morrow.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman DeGolia. Yeah, I agree with the past speaker, Adrian, that, yeah, this program will help a lot of governments fill that gap, and you'll be able to help these smaller public buildings that don't get a lot of attention. Maybe you can start at the smaller buildings and get those out of the way. But like you said, Chairman DeGolia, that, it has to be predicated on the gas. You got to be replacing the gas. My only other point of clarification is that once the municipality receives this loan, that money now becomes part of the municipality. So all these projects that will be funded will have to come under, there will be public works projects through those respected municipalities. And is that correct?
Yes, so these are city projects under city rules.
Yeah.
All right, so I agree. Start where you're at 10 million, but I think you're gonna get a lot of interest from every city, because they're all, let's face it, they're all under the gun for budgets. They're strapped. So I think this would be a great way to spend some of that excess funds. The more money you spend on electrification and all this get rid of greenhouse gases, the sooner it's gonna take effect. So I think as I sit for the IBEW, we would be in favor of this program wholeheartedly. Thank you, Chairman DeGolia.
Other comments, members? That's it for public comment. Are there any other comments from members of the board? Okay, so this is down as an action item. I personally feel like I really need to see the operating cost comparison to be able to support creating a project. Others, though, if someone wants to make a motion, they're welcome
Could we
to.
make a motion, subject to the data, or, I'm assuming the data is going to support it?
This is going to be a recommendation to bring it to the board.
Is there a timing issue with regard to when it goes to the board?
Well, it could either go this, it can go next.
So you can get the data for the executive committee meeting?
We could certainly delay it. I can't speak for Brisbane, which is one of the cases where we know that there's urgent timing concerns. So certainly from our standpoint, we could do it at any time. I know that there's concern.
Well, why don't you get into it and look at that, and if there's urgency to bring it this month, bring it this month. I personally think it needs more work. And I also think that giving the time for the surplus funds committee to meet after Labor Day will be better, because then this isn't preempting a decision that committee was charged with making, but it can come to the board. I can't support it until I can see the numbers, because I don't know what the numbers are. I'm hearing you. If Brisbane can save $30,000 to $40,000 a year in its operating costs to heat its pool, that is 100% different from everything I've heard today, which is to heat a pool with an electric pool heater versus a gas pool heater is much more expensive, is what we were told when Atherton was looking about whether we should include pool heaters in our reach codes. We were advised not to because the electric pool heaters were so much more expensive. And I actually thought PCE told us that, but maybe it wasn't PCE, maybe it was somebody else, but that was what was told to the council. So I'm really interested in seeing the data, but I need to see the data.
Would staff be able to bring that data to the board, full board, and then the final decision can be made then, but it seems like that would be the last part to have our chair support. And so there's opportunity for that, so I'd be happy to make the motion that we proceed with this and with that data be provided to the full board. Fair?
I would second.
I guess my only comment on that would be, part of what we're doing is trying to convert over to electricity anyway, so even if it did cost more, Brisbane might wanna still do it anyway.
We've had this project going almost over a year,
Yeah,
and originally it was going to be one heat pump water heater replacing a very failing gas heater. That's why the urgency. It's really in bad shape. And then they did a further analysis and said you're going to need two. And that scaled up all the costs instantly, and we went, whoa. So we've had to find other outside funding, but there's still not enough.
but you would do this project, even, but I mean, you would do this project, you would not replace gas because of your city's commitment to go to electric. Even if the electric cost to operate it was slightly more than the gas.
The problem would be if the gas one totally fails, we don't have anything then.
Right, but yes,
We need an emergency.
right.
And we don't have funds for an
But what
emergency.
I'm saying is that on the operations of it,
Yes.
Colleen, the long-term
We would do
operation,
that, yes.
you're gonna go with electric
It was a
regardless.
decision to do that. yes.
Okay, so then the electricity cost numbers are somewhat irrelevant for your particular project, right?
And besides, in the long run, you might not have a solar panel in there. Solution.
We have.
Is he sitting in my?
Okay, so should we go? We have.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? That's passed. I think we don't have time for the next item on the agenda. I think it's just a brief. I mean, unless people want to stay a little bit past 10,
So
5 minutes to 10.
what Leslie has prepared is about a 10 to 15-minute presentation, but it will open the box to all kinds of questions, which it's supposed to do. So it's a kind of a question about whether or not you guys want to stay a little bit longer or we agendize it to give it
Just
proper
proper
time.
board meeting.
What's that?
We have to talk about it this month. I cannot
Yeah.
hold it and wait to next month because we are on a deadline for making some policy decisions. So I do have to bring it to the board this month as an informer, just whether or not you guys want to review it.
I can stay until 12:30.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've
let's
got,
do
I've
it.
got to about
Okay.
12:30.
I have approval over here.
Great.
Thank you, Max. All
That's
right, Leslie. All right. If you would. We'll be back to you.
For a conversation that we're gonna be developing over the couple of months. Thank you. So if you remember, we talked about the net billing tariff a few months ago. This is a change that is happening with the next slide. We're gonna just recap briefly the transition from NEM 2.0 to the net billing tariff. Some of the major differences, looking at the, who is actually gonna be impacted by NBT. A little bit of a preview of what some of the other CCAs are doing, what they've told us formally and informally so far. And then some of the policy considerations that we have to, over the next couple of months. The next slide.
Question, so are they no longer calling it NEM3? They're now calling it net billing?
Yeah, so yeah, you can hit the button here. So yeah, NEM 3 is what was sort of colloquially referred to it coming up to it. NEM, net energy metering, is a specific sort of way of accounting for energy usage coming to and from the grid and then netting it out over time. That is not what's happening anymore. So in this new program, net billing tariff, it is no longer a netting of energy going back and forth to the grid. It is a separate accounting of every kilowatt hour that you're pushing out to the grid is counted one way. Every kilowatt hour that you pull from the grid is counted separately, and there's no longer any netting between those. There's no canceling of those two out anymore in this new program, and that's by design. Hit the button again. Be great, thank you. Just stay here for a second. So I'm gonna be calling it net billing tariff because that is the CPUC program. Solar billing plan is what the utilities are gonna call it, you know, on sort of in their customer facing material. So on PG&E's website, you're gonna hear about solar billing plan. That is what they're calling their program for the implementation of the net billing tariff. So again, the policy changes are meant to assess the export value of a solar system for every kilowatt hour that you push out to the grid. It's no longer going to be assessed or given a retail credit. It is going to be assigned a weighted cost calculator credit, this ACC calculator that exists throughout the state. And it is meant to offset sort of the very specific projected sort of generation benefit at the time, or in the hour of the day of the week of the day of the year that kilowatt hour is pushed out. And so it's not given a retail credit anymore if you're pushing kilowatt hours back to the grid. If you keep those kilowatt hours from your solar system at your house first and you use them, then that is giving a retail credit. That's the same. So because the way that the solar system works, it generates electricity, it goes to your house first. You've used those kilowatt hours, you're not buying kilowatt hours from the utility, so that has a full retail credit. It's only the kilowatt hours that you're pushing back out to the grid that you're not using, where the credit is now different. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So a little evolution here of, you know, the NEM policies over time. So NEM 1, which is all the way back from the late 90s, was really designed to proliferate solar throughout the state. They really wanted to heavily incentivize everyone who could install a solar system to install a solar system. It had very favorable tariffs to encourage that, where you got a lot of extra kilowatt hour credit for energy that you pushed out. About 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, we changed into the NEM 2.0 world, which was largely the same, except for some different tariffs were introduced. They no longer had the rates where you got a lot of credit for pushing kilowatt hours out in the middle of the day that you could sign up for. You had to sign up for the new time of use rates that had the peak hours of 4 to 9. But otherwise, we're still earning a retail credit at whatever the rate was in place when that kilowatt hour was pushed out to the grid. That's netted out over 12 months. Pretty much, you know, not a whole lot of difference, but the NBT program is
Wait, but on them too, we paid the customers retail plus 1 cent, right?
for kilowatt hours, yeah, that was pushed out to the grid. But in general, the program for the state was you got a retail credit.
Right.
Yeah, and so I'm not talking specific PCO,
No, I
I'm
know,
talking
but
like, yeah, the
just
state
what we
program
did
here.
was retail plus 1 cent.
Yeah, yeah. And then for NBT, it's really about aligning what's going on in the state with energy availability, the grid status, and not wanting to do anything to incentivize customers to push out kilowatt hours from their home solar systems in the middle of the day. It's very much disincentivizing that. So you can keep those kilowatt hours at your house, you could store them on site and in your battery system at your home. But if you're gonna push them back out to the grid in the middle of the day, you're gonna get almost no credit for that. It's gonna be very, very small amount of money, because they don't want that to do it. That's the policy of the program, is to not encourage that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, And this is just another summary. I won't go through all of this in detail. Couple of the bigger differences with the rate schedules for the NBT program, any new customers that are going to be enrolling in NBT or eligible to transition to NBT programs need to take service under an electrification rate. So in PG&E's territory, that's the E-electric rate that has the higher monthly fixed charge of $15 a month. And then you're following the same rate schedule that is available for the electrification customers. And that's the only rate that's available for residential customers under the NBT program. In previous programs, you could choose, a variety of different rates, but if you're an NBT customer, you're on the electric, period.
And these time periods are for when people got their interconnection agreements
Yeah.
approved, not.
Yeah.
So people that got an interconnection agreement approved, like the first group of municipalities that we are doing, all got it before April 14th, so they're.
Yeah, actually, everyone in our GovPB program, except for maybe a couple of potential exceptions, even in the round 2 program.
Even in the round 2.
Yeah, got the applications. in
They all got
before.
it under them too.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the, let's just go to the next slide really quick. So this is just an example. This is an analysis that I borrowed from Justin Kudo at MCE. This has been very generous to share out with folks. But this is giving a little bit of a snapshot of, sort of the relative value change of an exported kilowatt hour under, NEM 1, NEM 2, and NBT. He's got it split up. So for the generation value, T&D value, and then the total value. As you can see, and this is averaging, in the PG&E area. If you are, the generation value is quite a bit less under the ACC calculator, about an 80% drop. But the T&D value goes almost down to 0. It's a significant drop on the T&D side, which is important to understand for us in terms of a policy consideration going forward. If we are going to, because this what's happening on the T&D side is going to happen to customers regardless of what we do. And so they're going to be losing, they're going to be having rates that are going to tell them, don't push out kilowatt hours in the middle of the day because you're not going to get any credit for it. So that's going to, apply regardless of what we do on our side on the gen side. And so, again, the design of this program is to encourage customers to have more right-sized solar systems, smaller, but also to significantly incentivize battery storage. So that you can control if you're going to dispatch and also potentially dispatch at advantageous times, because there are times of the day and times of the year when that export value is actually higher. If you look at the entire year of the rate tables, there are, a few hours a day in September and in August, where between 4 and 5 and 9, 5 and 8, where you could actually get, a decent export if you could push kilowatt hours out for a couple of days, right?
Yeah.
Let's go to the next slide, please. And so this right here, and it's meant to not be able to see it, okay? Because this is a monthly export credit table. These are the rates, right? So this is actually an example from the month of November. This is what's published out. This is what, PG&E actually has the export tables up already. And so this is what the generation export table looks like for the month of November for next year. This is a projection. So this is, it's not meant to, I put it here as an example because if we've been working with our backend provider, Calpine, they've been working heavily with all of this information, taking it in. They have a plan to be able to ingest all of this data on our behalf. They can do a mirror billing to the ACC program that is going to happen for the PG&E side of the bill. They can do all of this, for us without us having to do any extra work on that at no charge. if we want to have different rates than what is going to be published by PG&E in their export tables, we need to create the tables and we need to give them to Calpine. So that's another consideration to sort of take in mind. If we want to have a different compensation rate, we're gonna have to make up a year's worth of compensation table and give them to Calpine. Yeah, so, yeah. Let's go to the next slide, please.
But some CCAs are doing that.
No, so far, no one's doing that, yeah. So, because of everyone's been doing, looking at this, everyone is basically on the page of, we're going to probably just follow what the IOU is doing and look for other opportunities, maybe to do something extra on the side, but I'll get there. Let's talk really quickly about who is this going to implement? It's not, or impact, it's not gonna impact a lot of customers for us, or really anyone throughout the state for a while. Existing NEM customers still have their 20 years for their original interconnection date before the new NBT policy goes into place. So anyone who installed their solar system within the last 15 years still has like 5+ or more years left to go. Right now, for us, for us, we have very few customers that we've been able to potentially identify as transitioning over. We're going through our information that we do have. We're working with PG&E to get clarification on it. But we've been able to identify that we think we have about 250 customers that would be eligible to transition to that NBT program in the first year of its operation. So between December 2023 and December 2024, because this will go into effect starting December 2023, unless something changes on the PG&E side. PG&E will be transitioning legacy NEM 1 customers who have had their solar system installed for 20 or more years, and their current interconnection agreement has sort of expired. They will be moved over into the NBT program starting in December of this year. PG&E is proposing to transition them on a soft transition, so with their next true-up. So by December of 2024, we think that we're going to have about 250 customers that would be on NBT. The only other customers that would be on NBT would be folks that have signed that submitted an interconnection application after April 15th of this year.
Yep.
And then have had their solar system installed, which, to be honest, is actually looking like quite a small number of folks at this point. Yeah. So
It says changes or upgrades to an existing solar system can trigger early transition. So what if you add battery storage onto an existing?
if you add batteries, so they've got a lot of caveats here. If you're adding battery storage, that will not violate your NEM 2 provision.
You only have to add 20% more panels than you have. That's
Yeah,
what
if you're just adding battery storage though to your system, you can add battery storage and that will not kick you out of NEM 2. If you're gonna add battery storage plus like up your system size by, like 20-30%, then that would kick you into NEM 2. Or not, or NBT out of NEM 2. Yeah.
I think you're like, in the first bullet, I think rather than the word original interconnection date, it should be last interconnection date, because if somebody upgraded their solar panels by adding more than 20%, it's not the original.
True.
interconnection date.
Yeah,
It's the
true.
last one.
Yeah, no, that's a good note. Yeah, thank you.
And also, all those customers who are now just putting in new solar systems on the roof, they're all gonna go to NBT.
Not necessarily, not really.
If they got the interconnection agreement approved before the 14th of April, and they have 3 years to install.
They have 3 years to install it.
I understand, but for the new ones that are not aware of this slide, not aware of this discussion, they're signing it and getting their Facebook,
Yeah.
spammed.
Yeah, there's not, so what I can
Yeah, you're
share
right.
so far, PG&E is committed to give us some more,
They're not publicizing this.
more reporting on this, but, prior to, April 14th, so in the last sort of like year, up until April 14th, they got and got a really overwhelming number. of
Especially in the last
interconnection
3 months
applications.
before.
The last 3 months, they got like 50,000.
Yeah.
But in the year leading up to that, they got over 100,000 interconnection applications. So they got more in the last few months than they did really in the you know, the year
But
prior.
based on that, we have 250,000
200,
now customers?
no, to 25,000.
Of 20, we have 25,000.
Yeah, we have about 25,000.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for and then since April 15th to like around July, in their entire territory, they've gotten, you know, like 2,000 applications. So it fell off a cliff after April 15th. People are still figuring out how to sell the program. They're not really sure what the process is gonna be. Also, they have now 100,000 systems they still need to install that they sold, that they haven't, you know, delivered on yet. Yeah, so let's go to the next slide real quick. And then, so what are the other CCAs planning? So far, only one CCA has actually formally adopted a policy, and that's CPA. That's the large CCA down in the LA area. And through their analysis, you know, what they determined is the best course of action would be to just follow the what SCE's program would be on the gen side, which would be to give the ACC credit, you know, for any export. And then they're gonna continue to look for other, they have a plan internally, they don't have it formally rolled out, but internally they're looking at some other programmatic opportunities to incentivize like battery storage, something like one-time rebates, you know, at time of installation to add, you know, battery storage to the system, maybe some other incentives for low-income customers. But that's really the approach that informally the other CCAs, we do have a working group that we're talking about, is that look for other sort of off, you know, one-off ways or outside of the slightly outside of the program ways to look for other ways to do incentivize other actions like battery storage, or give a little bit of a boost to low-income customers. That is not creating completely new compensation tables, because creating the new compensation tables would be a tremendous amount of work and a lot of admin that would probably also be confusing to customers, because if we have a different compensation rate, you know, then the IOU, the installers aren't necessarily gonna try to learn two different compensation tables and figure out, you know, what's going on between the two. And
But we have a different compensation rate than the IOU right now.
yeah, and they don't actually care, for the most part, to be honest.
I
Yeah,
mean, we pay us penny
we
above
do, yeah.
what
we
they
do.
pay. I mean, so I have a question. Could
Sure.
we, if we want, I mean, I understand the admin issue.
Yeah.
Putting that to the side. If we wanted to provide more incentive, could we do a rate that would be basically what the IOUs do now for NEM two, which is no additional incentive to what the IOUs do for NEM two, but for the export during the period that we identify, you know, up to 4 PM really is what it is. But if customers were to export during the peak period, we could give them increased incentive.
So, yeah, so I've been I talked to Raphael and Peter about that a little bit. What would really be ideal if we wanted to do that, because we actually would have to create whole new tables. We couldn't just do it for those hours, because the way the data is gonna be coming in from PG&E, it's gonna be this mass amount of data coming into Calpine, and it's not necessarily gonna be able to say, we can just pick off, you know, the 4 to 9 hours and then give 1 penny on those. Like we would have to build out the whole table ourselves to do that. If we wanted to do that, for the whole year.
Because right now we give 1 penny irregardless of when you actually.
Right, because, and it's easy to do it that way because of the way that the information comes in. The information from PG&E comes in one bucket, and it says, this is how many kilowatt hours the customer for the entire billing period. You know, in this bill, you know, over generated in this segment in the entire billing period, and company's like, okay, great. here's PCE's credit, retail credit times that, here's another line item that's all that one number times a penny, and it's a real easy transaction to do. But now you're talking about hourly data coming
Oh, yeah.
in, for every customer. And you have to, hit that against a specific table, of information. And so you can't, just tweak. Yeah.
So may I also add on this topic? Doesn't mean we can't do our own
Yeah.
rate tables in the future. I
Right.
think,
If we do the cost of service change.
That's
it's
right.
Gonna be our own. rate.
so I think what's not being, or maybe I'll just strengthen what we're saying here, which is the recommendation is during this year of transition,
Just go.
and it's really, I think it's less about admin burden, honestly, that's ours to figure out.
Yeah.
But it's customer confusion and just wanting to kind of like streamline. But if we go to cost of service, and even if we don't, once we sort of figure out what's gonna happen over here with our NEM 1, NEM 2, which is another discussion,
Yeah.
separate, but there's a discussion lining up about that. And then you look at this overlay, maybe there's an opportunity down the line to do our own. But I think it's sort of,
We're gonna do it twice.
it's incremental
Yeah.
or sequential. if you
Yeah.
will. That's
Yeah, 'cause-
that's the rationale.
Yeah, and really the people that we're talking about right now that are gonna be on NBT are gonna be folks that have a 20-plus-year-old solar system. And they're not having they're not gonna have batteries on that, that are, at least not smart batteries that can export out at specific times of the day. If they have batteries, they're the old school, solar car batteries that are only there if the grid goes down to power backup, for the home.
Or they could put in new batteries,
They could, but to be honest, Rick, I don't think they're going to. I think,
because their solar panels aren't sufficiently efficient.
yeah, and if they do, then that's a different program that we could target them at. But I personally have a strong suspicion that when those old systems that were never upgraded, if nobody ever took the time or investment to re-upgrade them under NEM 2 when they could have, when that inverter fails and some other thing catastrophic happens with those systems, I think they're probably just gonna get abandoned. I don't think those folks are gonna go and invest another $20,000 under, and I could be wrong, but I don't think they're gonna go invest another $25,000 for a whole new NBT system.
Which
Yeah,
frankly, basically says no one's gonna invest in an MBT system, because though, if they're abandoned, they actually have some infrastructure that could be used, and they would just be putting in a whole new system.
they would have, the infrastructure associated with a solar system that's over 20 years old is, to be honest, is pretty much strong,
No, the conduit is fine.
maybe, but yeah, it might be, but a new installer would probably come in and want to rip everything out and start over again with their stuff. They won't want to take on the liability of using older stuff and have their own kind of system. They would probably want to just rip everything out and start over.
They use the conduit. If the conduit's put in the right place, and conduit goes through attics and stuff, they're gonna use the conduit.
Potentially, yeah, but that might be the only infrastructure that exists from 2001. And in 2001 and 2002, there was the really early days of stuff, and it was back when, I worked with a lot of those people when I was in Santa Clara. And a lot of those systems were not, they were well-intentioned, people were doing really good things. They made a big investment back then to do it, and I suspect that a lot of those folks aren't gonna wanna re-up and make the same investment twice.
If they did it when they were 50 or 60 years old, now they're 80, they're gonna be in a.
Yeah.
It's a timing.
Yeah, it's a timing
You sold
situation.
the house and then the system runs off, a new young buyer might.
Right, yeah, a new person could come in and do it, but I don't think that same homeowner is gonna up it twice.
I think
Yeah.
that's right. But I think that some of those homes are gonna turn over. They're-
I definitely
Yeah.
need a crown because it's in the dead for the cross. So it's like the same.
Yeah,
So do you need us to make a recommendation?
no, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up of like what's going on right now. And then so like real quick, we're on to the next one. The next slide. So the things that we have to think about, and we do have to pass a policy in the next couple of months of how we're going to handle the NBT customers, because PG&E will be turning this on in December, and I need to tell Calpine what to do, before then.
Action.
So when they start getting that data for their customers, they know how to handle it, right? And so, we're gonna have to make determination about how we wanna handle MBT, customers when they come on. And like I mentioned, we know that alternative to ACCs, that's gonna be challenging to implement, something we could probably investigate down the line. If we wanna do something different than that, but I would recommend, and it's not formal recommendation right now, but I'm gonna recommend that we just follow, course, for now. And then, we're getting some more information. We're just starting to get some of the presentation, bill presentment information from PG&E, which is gonna, help us inform really kind of on our end what our options are for presenting on the bill, like what the charges look like. Because that has been a black hole for the past few months. But we have a monthly meeting scheduled, or actually 5 month or bi-weekly meeting scheduled with the PG&E NBT team. And they're supposed to be bringing us an update in the next meeting, which is in a couple weeks, of what that's gonna look like, and what the presentation could be. But this is just, this is just more for information right now, because to think about it, and it will be coming to the board, in the next couple of months for an actual, NBT policy approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what I'd like to say is, we will come back to the board and ask whether or not it makes sense to then take a fresh look at our NEM 1 policy, which carries over to NEM 2. It's separate, but we might want to think about policy amendments
Yeah.
for all of our NEM
That makes sense.
programs.
And also, on current incentive programs for the solars, we've been kind of transitioning in to solar with battery only. Basically, our message to people is, you need to have battery in order to make sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and presented as one of the program, we've had a solar and batteries program that Sunrun ran that effectively failed. And there's gonna be a proposed change, which this discussion would fit in with very well. Because there are other CCAs and electric co-ops that provide much more robust battery programs where the CCA gets some control over the battery. They fund the homeowners or the businesses to put in the batteries, which would help. We want to push power to the evening. And that would do that. That's the shift load that Raphael was getting into. And that, he was focusing on with EVs, but in general, shifting load to the evenings is the name of the game for us. And batteries is the better, whether it's in your car or not in your car, is the best way to do it. And we could incentivize that.
And you said the CCA or folks like us actually have
Total control of the batteries for limited periods of days in the year over certain times. And it counts as RA. I don't know what it counts like in California, but for them, it counts as RA. And if we're done right, it could be fairly significant.
And that possibly, it's obviously for the church. Community resiliency.
Yeah, and community solar is different than behind the meter because it's behind the substation, but in front of the meter. And it creates a whole discussion around microgrids, which I think is a really important discussion for us. So yes, the answer is yes to your answer.
You just answered every single question I was gonna ask you. Everything from the microgrids to could be instead of incentivizing people to buy batteries. We pay for the battery, but they give us the properties to set up these microgrids.
Well, I don't know if it said, microgrids tend to be in front of the meter, not behind the
I
meter.
understand.
The batteries, if we're helping businesses and homeowners buy batteries, that's typically almost 100% gonna be behind the meter.
Yeah.
And but what it'll do is shift load, right? That's what the new net billing tariff is wanting to do, even though there's a lot of problems with the way they structured it, but that's what that's why it's called solar billing. That's what they want to do. For us, I mean, most of our customers who would want the batteries aren't installing new solar panels under this net billing tariff program. We've got 25,000 customers with panels. And I don't know how many have batteries, but if it's 5,000, it'd be surprised.
I don't think it's.
So there's a lot of I've heard it in spades in the last 7 years, of lots of our customers who would love to get batteries, and we haven't had a program that incentivized them to do that. And the batteries frankly were quite expensive, and they're going down. So
It would be interesting, if I may, to think about this big topic, because it does feed advanced energy systems, microgrids. It feeds, I think, in some way, NBT. It would be interesting to bring this to the board retreat. Because to me, like, this is the wave of the future. And so looking at how we embody, you know, whatever the board prioritizes in current programs, and then thinking about what it means for future programs, what it means for our incentives for solar. It's a much bigger conversation. But in that environment, I feel like we could give time for full, I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah.
there's lots of issues.
Does that make sense to you?
The 100% win is to control the grid behind the substation, so you're not subject to the grid shutdowns in front of the substation, which is transmission, but we don't own those power lines. And except for a few suppliers, nobody wants to buy those power lines from PG&E.
Yeah.
Right.
Understand the cost and liability to try to have power.
Yeah.
Right, like we should control it, like.
Yeah, no, you did.
You guys, it was like, or to
Yeah.
Sharon, to Sean, somebody said, hey, you should take over, it's like, no.
Oh, yeah.
You shouldn't take over.
We could never.
But we have to figure, I mean, it might be a program with PG&E, I don't know, and it's a very interesting subject area in general. And I don't think anybody has solved the best practices around community solar. I haven't seen a really, there's a company out of Chicago that's doing, I think I copied you on an email exchange with them, but they never really pursued it. I've been based here, so. There are people that are exploring it, that's for sure.
San Francisco's trying to buy this.
San Francisco is, that's right. But San Francisco is also, they are, because they're a totally different animal. They already own the lines that come from Moccasin to San Francisco. So they're owning, that's transmission lines. So they're very different.
They're their own public utility.
Yeah,
Their CCA program is a subset of San Francisco Power and Water.
that's right,
So
that's right.
it's a different animal.
I just wonder if under the crushing weight of all this infrastructure, if still moving forward at some point, PG&E is going to be divested into smaller parcels that will be owned more locally. And
Not
that would-
willingly.
Yeah,
Not
it would be
really.
directed by the state. It would have to be directed by the
Yeah.
state.
Yeah, but I can foresee it happening just because.
Well, it was absolutely discussed when Sam Lacardo made his proposal, what was it, 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
ago?
Capital buyers,
But
first set of buyers.
But the question
First
about
set of
that
buyers.
is to then you disseminate, like you say, you disseminate the risk upon all of us. So if there's a wildfire that starts and there's a $6 billion bill, we're gonna pay that
well, if we own.
if we own. So how long that you want to buy a thing, it goes.
And we end up taking over the sole provider status. Right now, utilities have provider of last resort, which definitely transfer the risk onto them for, you know, serving as that backup power role. There are, you know, Cal CCA has looked at this in the past around trying to make a play to be the sole provider, and that has not gone anywhere as yet.
It's just interesting, the risk with PG&E with the wildfires, where all the ads about undergrounding, and then I just read that was part of their agreement with the court. Yeah, they were gonna do this,
It's in that book.
and now they're not meeting the requirement. They're instead putting the, I don't know what you call them, the circuit breakers and saying, oh,
Yeah.
this is cheaper and faster.
I got one going in front of my I mean, I've got stuff going on right out of my house that I'm dealing with PG&E on. So I have a transformer on a pole in front of my house
Yeah, I do too.
and,
But the risks aren't in our areas, the risks are in the rural areas. I mean, and Skyline West has really big risks on the power.
Well, thank you. Anything else, Leslie? No, on this topic?
thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, stay late.
No.
I just- thank you.
Sure. Okay, so the last item on the agenda is committee member reports. The net building, Tara. Is there any public comment? Committee member report?
We can go next.
I have a report, which is Atherton is celebrating its 100th year anniversary on Sunday, September 24th, which is a big party and big event happening at our new town center area. So if anyone's interested in coming,
Put
it's
that in our
10 to
newsletter?
2.
Can we get it in our newsletter?
Sure.
Oh, I think it'd be fun to have a community.
The 100 year.
Yeah.
Community corner.
Or. and-
Thanks, everybody, for staying late. Appreciate it.
Adjourn?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.